Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fanscription podcast. I am Walter Benasiak here with Robert Walker. How are you, sir?
Good. And I have a secret. I killed Mufasa.
That's pretty good. So we're here today to talk about the new Fanscription episode that went up just a few days ago, which is up there right now. By the way, new monitor. Awesome.
Hooray!
Yes.
We don't have that stupid banner with Doug's ugly mug on it.
You had no idea how many times that thing fell down or like having to put that thing up was a pain in the butt. But now we have just a monitor. Just like Doug. Well, the video was called "What If Skaar Raised Simba in The Lion King?" I gotta thank you guys right off the bat because this is by far our highest viewed episode already, which is over 200,000 views. So for a non-Nostalgia Critic episode on Channel Awesome,
sweet.
Great.
The mouse's cheese paid off.
Yes, we get the table scrapped.
And we get to criticize the mouse too, doing it.
At the same time, praise and criticize the mouse. And we're going to get into all that stuff. So there's a lot to talk about here on this podcast. We're going to be talking about the original Lion King, our thoughts on that. I'm going to give you a little insight about the stuff that didn't make it into this What If. I rewrote this a few different times, so I wanted to share with you a couple of things that didn't make it into the video. We're going to be taking questions from people online that I asked on Twitter and Facebook. So you guys sent in a couple questions for Rob and I to answer. We're also going to be talking about
I'm
the
a Gemini,
remake.
By the way. Nice.
Yes. We're also going to be talking about the remake because that's inevitable since that's in theaters right now. And I think
I didn't bring any liquor.
Yeah. I think you've shared your thoughts with Brad in a video.
Yeah,
but,
Doug did his alone. Brad was in town, so
right.
I'm honestly glad I didn't do it with Doug because I'm like, I think Doug needed that minute alone. To
I love it. Was very cathartic.
Go unhinged. I'm like,
yeah,
I wouldn't have calmed Doug down, but I just would have sat by the side watching this unfold. So
right. So we're going to get into all our thoughts about that. I shared a couple opinions about it online, but we're going to get into it in video form here. So we'll talk about the original Lion King first, the 1994 classic. Which a lot of people consider Disney's best. It was the peak of their Renaissance period.
I think if you're Doug, though, you would say overrated.
I don't don't think it's overrated. Myself. It's not my top favorite.
I want to go on record saying that before people loop me in with him on that.
A little bit of a difference of opinion.
A little bit there.
I love The Lion King. I grew up with The Lion King. I was 5 or 6 years old when this came out. I don't remember if I saw it in theaters. I might have, but I mean, watching it on home video over and over and over again was definitely a big thing in my household. With my younger siblings as well, growing up with it, and even with the sequel that came out in '98, I believe Simba's Pride came out. I remember being very excited to see that as a kid. Now it's not as great, but it's not the worst, Disney direct-to-video sequel that they made. So.
No, that might be something Doug and I do sync up on, which is I don't really have a problem with that one that much because the bar was set, like when you have to watch all of these sequels for Disney December,
yeah, right.
That bar is set so low that I'm like, honestly, I'd give the Lion King sequel like some props for actually not being that bad. I'm like, okay, this could have been way worse.
For sure. But in terms of the original, it is a big part of what I identify as Disney. So I think a lot of people my age and your age who grew up with it, and a lot of kids who have seen the animated version of it, are so excited because this live action version of it is coming out and everything.
I wasn't excited, but
right. Well, a lot of people were. A lot of people love The Lion King, so a lot of people are going. I do love The Lion King. Certain expectations. Yeah. So, what were some of your original opinions on The Lion King? Do you have any memories around seeing it?
We were living in Seattle, which is like my favorite city outside of Chicago. So there were a lot of that's like a very nostalgic time for me. Like about 92 to 95, where there were a lot of great summer movies. I remember Jurassic Park, The Fugitive, and Aladdin, Lion King. Lion King was one of them. I was like, everybody hits that jerk phase in their teen years, and I was 15, and I'm like, I'm getting too old for cartoons, and so they did the ad for The Lion King. I'm like, I'll go see it, and I was ready to just kind of be like, oh, it's not really that great. I was blown away by it. I think for me too, I had just lost a grandparent that year. I had lost one a few years before, but we weren't really close. It was a distance, but this one this grandparent I had grown up with, so that was kind of fresh on my mind, and I was I thought it was really gripping, and I was kind of prepared to just be like, I'm too old for Disney now, and I just got really wrapped up in it. I was 15 at the time, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't care. I really like this movie. I wouldn't say it was perfect. Even back then, I thought Timon and Pumbaa were the weak part. It's not that the performances are fine. I love Nathan Lane in that movie. You had such a darkness and this kind of nature tone to it. Like It's very much like Bambi, which is another film I really enjoy, where it's really just about nature and the circle of life. And it's kind of like they got spooked, much like they do in Bambi, about like, oh man, now this is really dark. Like, cut to some flowers or something, and then this one it's like cut to Hakuna Matata. Like, so that portion of it didn't really grab me as much, but what I really...
It was for the kids, for sure.
It was for the kids, and that song is so annoying, but what I really did like about it was once Rafiki comes in, that whole sequence is just pitch perfect. And it's a film that you
talking about Simba Rafiki scene?
Yeah, the Simba Rafiki scene, and Mufasa comes in the clouds, and that lesson that they cut out of the remake, but just
I know that's the one thing they cut out.
The past can hurt, but you can either run from the past or learn from it. Like I love that bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
The choir, that was my first introduction to like world music. Like the Le Bohème choir was spectacular. The Hans Zimmer score, it's one of my favorite soundtracks.
It's great.
The Elton John songs, honestly, like I like Circle of Life and I like Be Prepared, but most of the Elton John songs are kind of garbage. I'm like, I Can't Wait to Be King's not really a great song. I don't like Hakuna Matata, and I feel like Can You Feel the Love Tonight always...
That won an Oscar, I think.
And I laughed at that because it's, it sounds like Milhouse's dad, that song he wrote, Can I Borrow a Feeling? Like, it's like, what does that mean, Can You Feel the Love Tonight? But the thing is, like, everything else was so good about it. And again, like, those songs, too, the African choir also makes it. So, yeah, there were, like, little tiny things. And, of course, the voice acting with... I'm not a Matthew Broderick fan. And
I understand that point of view as someone older going back and watching that. He doesn't quite fit in there. But
he sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, really? James Earl Jones sired this?
Yeah, it's kind of strange. But I think like when he gets older and when we see him interact with people on Pride Rock, when he gets kind of gruffer, like the voice you use,
he grows on me, particularly in the last like 10 minutes of the film.
Yeah, right.
When he has to say the words, no, Hakuna Matata. I'm like, ugh.
Something I learned out here.
Yeah, I don't, but and then the Disneyfication of the voice actors, where somehow you've got like Jonathan Taylor Thomas as young Simba, and then when he sings, he becomes this like soul singing Jackson 5 artist, and you're just like, if he was good enough to sing that, he probably was good enough to voice act it, but we needed JTT, and then Nala, where she goes from a little black girl to like this white woman, and I'm like, how is this working? Like, it's my biggest gripe is just that I would have rather they just be consistent one way or the other. Like, I'm like, okay, if you want a different, like, if you want a white actor to do it, that's fine, but don't switch him out with the songs, and because it really, like, it's kind of cringeworthy when I watch it as an adult. I'm like, it's weird.
Right. I think that this might have been one of the first big animated movies to use like an all-celebrity cast, because we had, obviously, Robin Williams in Aladdin before this, but the rest of the cast weren't big names or anything. I think Steve from Full House voiced Aladdin. That's the second biggest name in there, maybe. And Frank Welker, of course. But I mean, like in terms of well-known mainstream people,
I think you're right.
Yeah, and this is all celebrity voice. I mean, the original. I mean, besides James Earl Jones, you got Matthew Broderick.
Yeah,
all these other.
I'm kind of hit and miss on that because I feel that there are great voice actors out there who should be given a shot, and you just don't say, well, because you're a celebrity, we need you.
Right.
But it's mostly well acted. I actually think Jonathan Taylor Thomas does like a good job.
Yeah.
I just wanted like consistency, because I think it's a little insulting to be like, well, he can't sing though, and I'm like, well, why don't you find somebody who can sing? And so like, I don't know, it's just weird. But and I know Doug had like all these criticisms that I don't quite follow. Like,
it's very important for you to differentiate yourself from his opinions on this film.
But yeah, I liked the finale. There's there's criticism, not even Doug, like there's one criticism people go like, well, just because you ate all of the antelope doesn't mean that the whole place is going to go into like a drought or whatever. I'm like, it's a metaphor. It's like the land and the king are one. It's Arthurian. It's like, just don't think too hard about it. Just go with the emotion on that. Like, but people get hung up on little things sometimes, and
I know, like, I mean, people talking about, like, oh, real lions wouldn't do this or that. These lions are talking. Can we just, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, give me a break here. This is a Disney movie, man.
And somehow, like, the brother lion is British, and then there's James Earl Jones, and we've got a British bird or something. Colonizer. It's like, it doesn't really make any sense. Like, it's just...
It's a metaphor for bigger things.
Go with the flow.
Right, and it works so well.
But yeah, great movie, and one of the most colorful,
absolutely
gorgeous Disney films ever made.
Yes.
So I don't think it's overrated.
No, I don't think so either.
I think it deserves a place alongside Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Hunchback. Like that run from about
Hunchback. I mean, for me, is kind of like iffy, but it has great stuff.
So Hunchback to me is similar to Lion King, where I'm like, man, you take some of the comic relief out of it, I think you've nailed it. But it's like Disney can never fully commit. They're just like, I don't want to spook the little kids too much.
Well,
like,
maybe with the live-action version of that one, which they're planning, maybe
we'll see what happens,
they'll go all the way with that.
I think that run from... Was Hunchback before or after Pocahontas?
Hunchback was after, because Pocahontas, I think, was right after.
So Pocahontas is the odd one out. But that run definitely from Little Mermaid to Lion King was just spot on.
I know. Great stuff. I mean, that's what I grew up with, like I said before. So, I mean, like a lot of people...
I think it's the Disney Renaissance, as we like to call it now.
Right.
For me, the golden age of Disney for what I lived through. Because obviously I wasn't alive back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Yes. Are you sure?
I'm a dinosaur.
That's very smart. Anyway, I wanted to ask this question and pose this to you guys as well, because... I got to thinking about the remake and everything, and they're going through this phase of remaking all of their animated films as live action, or live action in this case, versions of them. Do you think if they didn't waste all of their resources and all of the creativity maybe on the Disney direct-to-video sequels, and they held off on those, do you think now maybe we'd be getting these long-standing sequels to those beloved classics now, instead of getting live action versions of them? Or is this just about showcasing technology or something? I mean, with this one, obviously it is, but with the other ones, I don't think that's the case.
Showcasing technology, which is, I said in Brad's vlog, I don't understand. I didn't find the special effects that groundbreaking. I'm like, looks like Jungle Book to me. So,
but we'll get into more specific thoughts.
I don't know. That's a really good question, because if you didn't, because people still remember those not well. And then just as people are going to look back on this, like, you can sit here and be like, I enjoyed it. You're going to look back, a number of people are going to look back 10, 20 years from now and go like, what was that? Because eventually we're going to hit a point where people are done with this. Mm-hmm. In which case, like, will Disney ever enter an era where they're like, maybe we shouldn't be remaking things for a good chunk of time? Which I hope so.
I hope soon they figure it out. But,
yeah, I honestly don't know. Like, it's hard to say.
I think it would be great. I mean, like, in terms of... like if they abstain from making sequels to these classics for so long, and then 20 years later, it's like, now we finally have a great story, we're going to put these out.
My disappointment with the Lion King sequel is I wanted it to have the same budget as this movie. Mm-hmm. I would have... I would have wanted it to be as pretty and gorgeous. It's such a big... Aladdin's one where... If you did they did do a sequel, and they did two, and it was directed, and it was lower budget, but I just didn't feel on the same level that it was as soul crushing to see it in a lower budget. Because I'm like, Aladdin's a pretty film, but I'm like, it's bare bones, it's comedy, it's Lion King was such a show off movie for the animation department. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Which is funny, because I keep seeing that most of the animators didn't want to work on Lion King because they wanted to work on Pocahontas. Which is hilarious.
Which kills me, because that movie's awful.
Right, I don't like Pocahontas either, so that's pretty funny.
I like some of the production design. I'm like, okay, I see what they were going. It was more of a Beauty and the Beast, not Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, very stylized kind of look to it. But yeah, it's so funny that happened, because I'm like, man, Lion King's a superior looking movie.
Absolutely, 100%. But it would be interesting to think about. I mean, I think that they would make just as much money if they made sequels to those movies now in the old 2D style, or even if they wanted to make a 3D version of it. I think that would still be better received from some people, from like the likes of us. And
you would have to come up with an
reviewers
alternate
and
universe
stuff.
where Eisner just got booted well before.
Maybe. I mean, maybe that's the next Fanscription.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are our thoughts on the original Lion King movie. Now we'll move on to the What If episode, which was, of course, what if Skaar raised Simba. Originally, Rob was, like we talked about last month, Rob was supposed to handle this one, but life got in the way.
Yeah, I had to both move and I got super sick.
Mm-hmm.
And you called and just asked and just like, are you going to be able to do this? And I'm like, no. So it worked out for the best because, like, honestly, like, once you said Lion King, I'm like, just do it, man. Just because it's the really it thing to talk about right now. And it's like, I think it's an important thing to talk about because, like, it's not just about chasing the zeitgeist. It's like, this is something Disney's doing right now that needs to be addressed one way or another and talked about.
Absolutely.
So I think definitely like doing this was the right call.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was just an idea that I kind of had offhand, and I was contacting Rob to just see, like, are you still going to be able to do it? Because we had to get stuff moving for the artist and everything. To our great artist, by the way, Anna, who makes the art for these last few episodes.
Work.
Yes, absolutely awesome. So we had to get those descriptions to her. So I was like, "Are you like, how's the schedule going on this?" And he was like, "You know, you're going through some stuff, and we couldn't get that one out." So I was like, "I got this idea for Lion King. So if you can't do it, let me know." And he did. But I wanted to get it out like right before the movie, so it came out like the day before the movie came out. So I rushed to get this one together, and I think it turned out pretty well. I'm proud of this one in terms of like the story and everything. I think it fit together pretty well.
Well, that's what we do. We talk about pop culture. And this is pop culture right now. Like Lion King's is everywhere. Like love it or hate it, people have an opinion. So.
Right. And you guys seem to really enjoy it. I was expecting a lot of blowback for like, how dare you change the Lion King?
I thought so too. I think honestly, this awful remake gave you an advantage because people are like, you know what, this sounds better than what we got.
We did get a lot of comments like that. Like, I wish this was the remake. This was the live action version story.
That's the thing. I would have much rather seen your story, which I thought was really good, as the remake, because the remake, like if you did this as a remake, it doesn't wreck your childhood because it's a different idea.
Right.
It's a good idea, at least, unlike half of what Disney does nowadays. But it was a different idea, and I'm like, okay, like this is a different story. I always feel like, you know, the one thing about myths is if you read myths like in depth, there's so many different versions of the same story, or you could have like the Greek myths and realize that none of them quite sync up. It's like, well, how could Hercules be doing this if he's here in this story doing this? Or I thought he killed this person, but in this story, this person's a lot like... There's something to myths about that, so you don't need to treat it as just like, well, this is supposed to replace the other one. You could treat it as like, no, this is one of the many legends people speak of.
Right.
And I think people would be more forgiving of that.
That's why I think that these properties, these classic Disney movies, they're bulletproof almost. So you could do anything with them with the same concept, and it would make a ton of money. Like it doesn't really matter, you know. Like unless the movie's truly, truly awful and is not some kind of spectacle, then like that's the only way that they're not going to make money off of these things. But you say Lion King, people are going to show up to see it, obviously, because it made. I can't even, like, over $400 million, $500 million at the box office. If you make something this weekend,
not to replace the old one,
right,
but to stand alongside it,
exactly.
I think people would be more forgiving. I think with a lot of these, with like Beauty and the Beast, and this one's the worst. I think, in particular for doing this, is that by making it shot for shot, it feels like you're trying to replace the other one.
Right.
You know, and you can argue, well, that's not technically what's going on, but that's how it comes across, and that's why like. That's why Pete's Dragon worked. Pete's Dragon was so different. They're like, okay, we're going to tell a different story here.
And no one saw that one.
And that was one of the...
Pete's Dragon's not one of the highest, you know, like, regarded Disney movies.
Well, this is where it gets troublesome, because it's like, the ones that really need to be remade are the ones that were, like, only okay to begin with. I mean, I liked Pete's Dragon as a kid. I love the Don Bluth animation on it. Like, it's not one of those Disney classics, like, this is untouchable. So it's like, why not remake ones like those? But then... well, people won't go see it. Well, then my answer is then fine. If you want to do these big ones, you do it, but you do something different.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with you 100%. It would be fun. I mean, obviously, I'm a fan of What Ifs. I like doing this show, and I like just asking interesting questions about, you know, just changing something else and how that would affect the story. So it would be fun to see something like this. I mean, I know they did Twisted Tales. A lot of people were telling me. You ever heard of that? It was like a book series. like what ifs for Disney.
I had not heard of it, but yeah, I noticed a number of people were pointing that out in the comments.
Right. So like, if you have any more information on that, like, send it our way, and I'll take a look at some of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to just ask interesting questions, and I think that Skaar raising Simba, no matter what angle you took on it, would be interesting. If he killed Mufasa and then he was the king and raised Simba as his son on Pride Rock, that would be interesting. But also,
it's even more Shakespearean probably than the original, which is pretty damn Shakespearean.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's a Hamlet. I mean, it's kind of retelling
Hamlet
almost.
Moses hybrid kind of thing,
right? With just a little bit of Kimba the White Lion in there, but that's a discussion for another time.
Just a touch,
just a little bit of
just
Kimba,
a
right?
touch.
They didn't know anything about that, but anyway,
sure,
right. But for this one here, I just thought it would be cool to kind of have Skaar take Simba away, which also changes Skaar's character a little bit, because he's kind of this prissy sort of character who is not willing to suffer at all himself to get what he wants.
You can't imply he's gay.
Possible.
That makes you too woke.
I didn't say that. But he is definitely a character who is not willing to make a lot of personal sacrifices to get what he wants. He just kind of takes the easiest route and plans underhandedly. Skaar in this version would be a little bit more willing to take on those sacrifices to really screw over Mufasa and rub this in his face. So in this version, I kind of had like a backstory I didn't put in there about like they had kind of a challenge, Mufasa versus Skaar, and Skaar like was humiliated by this, and he wanted to get back at Mufasa the best way possible. And to do that, I think would to take his own son and turn him to his side and then return one day. And
I loved it. It is dark. If I have one criticism, it's that I can't see Disney doing this.
A lot of people are saying it's not a kid's thing, but I think that they could still work around some of those dark elements.
So here's the interesting thing. I don't see, particularly in 1994, was that when that came out? I don't see them doing this as an animated film in 1994. If you had handed this to Jon Favreau, he might have looked at this in a Jungle Book kind of way and gone like, yeah, we can do a quote-unquote live action, but the CGI version of this, because this match is kind of a more adult element.
Right.
I actually think it would work better as the Lion King remake.
That's what a lot of people were pointing out.
Yeah, if you literally said like, this is the remake, so we're doing the Lion King, but it's from this way different sort of point of view and like different things happen, I would have been riveted watching this story. I'm like, okay, cool. You did something new. Like, is it better than the original? Does it matter? It's like, no, it's different enough that you could just be like, well, if it was good enough an entertaining experience, then that's all you need.
Right. And I repeated this several times in the video that I'm not trying to make something better than the Lion King. The original story. I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm just trying to ask an interesting question and play with the same character.
Which is what Disney should be doing.
But they didn't. So, I mean, I'm going to go over a couple of the unused ideas because I did rewrite this several times and it was kind of tough to crack a couple of the specific plot points in this. So
you formed a pretty good narrative. I'm like, it's I don't want to say clunky. It's definitely a little more complex because the narrative of Lion King's pretty straightforward.
Absolutely. And this
but
adds
I'm like, this is
layers
definitely like a lot more layers to it. But I was thinking, no, I think this works.
Right. One of the things a lot of people were pointing out that this is kind of basically Simba's arc in this is kind of just Kovu from the second Lion King movie. And there's definitely parallels there in terms of him being sort of raised as this evil heir to go back and take over and stuff. But at the same time, with Skaar actually there, it completely changes that dynamic because he's still kind of an underling of Skaar, where Kovu was being bred to actually take over Pride Rock as king.
And again, the other thing is, how many people have seen that movie?
A lot.
No, a lot have, but not everybody. Like there's
all the Channel Awesome fans.
A lot of my generation who also grew up with it because we were in our teens might not have gotten around to it because we're like, screw the Disney sequels. That was certainly my thought. I didn't see it till years after it was released.
Right. I saw it first day it was released on VHS.
But the other important thing is, so what? Because if you're really making something that's supposed to be like a remake but also new, you can take from whichever story you want. Right. That was the brilliance, I thought, of the Castlevania anime that they did on Netflix.
I heard a lot about that.
They took Castlevania 3 and Symphony of the Night, two very separate games with separate stories, fused them together. And like, I wouldn't sit there and be like, well, it should have only been Symphony of the Night, or well, it should have only been Castlevania 3. I'm like, no, you actually gave us something new, because I know Castlevania 3 and I know Symphony of the Night. I played both games. It's like,
right.
do I just want to see the exact same story again? It's
Change
like,
it up.
no, give me something different.
Exactly. And if we're going to go after these properties again, if we're not going to get something truly original, then why not play with it a little bit more? But that's a discussion again for another time. So one of the unused ideas I had for this What If was bringing Zira, which is the sort of the leader of the Outlanders in the Simba's Pride, the second Lion King movie, who raises Kovu and stuff. I kind of had an idea to bring her and a couple other lionesses who sort of left with Skaar, but logistically that might not actually make sense because he had to make it look like he died. And also I wanted to keep the focus just on Simba and Skaar. And kind of the hyenas.
There's a dynamic that works too in the original, and I think you're best off maintaining it, which is that Skaar goes to basically a foreign force to try to do this. Like, and I love that about the stories. All these kind of political things, the hyenas versus the lions. And I think if Skaar picks off lions to come with him, there's something about him attached to the hyenas. Children can get that. It's very basic. It's like,
the others
hyenas are the others here. Like, Skaar goes to them to try to come back, take over, invade. Like, it gets a little too complicated if you start.
That's why I didn't want to go too deep into some of that stuff. Also, logistically, I have it where Skaar takes Simba as like a very young cub, so maybe like a month or two old. So he would not be able to survive without some kind of female lion, a lioness there to give him milk and stuff. So I thought that would be an interesting thing to explore in like a sequel where like who helped Simba survive. And there was a female, a lioness out there somewhere where he runs into, because at the end of this story, he does kind of go off to be that rogue lion with Timon and Pumbaa. So that could be a fun thing to explore later, but I didn't want to jam that in this one.
There was one thing I would change. Is just like you said, how old was Simba supposed to be when he's
taken? Very young, like a month or two old. So where he
wouldn't
remember, what happened.
I would make him slightly older so that he would just have the barest of memories. But that Skaar just over the years, just like pounces, like I would make it more like a 3 or 4 year old, where it's just like if you imagine a parent over the years just like completely wiping the memory of the past. Because I thought that would have been a cool scene if when Mufasa comes and says, you are my son, this and that, if you could like have Simba flash back to early images of his father, his mother, and this, and
could be a good idea.
It would be a great way to just be like snap, just like, oh my god, like I remember.
No, that totally works. I totally understand what you're saying there. I think just having like a blank slate for Skaar to work with just seemed a little bit cleaner to me, where we didn't have to go into too many things, because I don't want these to be too long,
I get that. I mean, I was thinking too, just like as I saw it, I was like, the magic cloud told me things. I'm like, well, it's a magic cloud, I guess.
It is, right.
Because like that was the one thing, is that Simba remembered his father in the original, so that's what gave it that. I'm like. So it's like maybe if it unlocks primordial memories, and he's just like, oh no, like but
if we had like an hour or something to explore some more character motivation and stuff, that would be fun to explore for sure. Sticking with the Lion King 2 thing, I did almost have Skaar rename Simba a different name. So I was thinking maybe Kovu, but I didn't want to tie it too much into that second Lion King movie, where he returns and he's under a different name, but everyone still kind of recognizes Simba. But I thought it was more powerful where Simba comes back and he's still using the name that Mufasa gave him, and Skaar has just twisted that name into something completely different. Instead of changing
I do like that.
And I thought that was kind of more sinister for Skaar to do than change it completely.
It's easier too, I think. The only problem is if anybody discovers Skaar and them out there, if any of the lions, somebody leaving like,
well, they just kill him.
There's a Simba? Yeah, it's like, I guess so. It's like, there's a Simba out here? What?
Right, exactly. So there is a point where this was a big change that I had. Simba, at the point where Mufasa dies in this, which is where they kind of storm Pride Rock and everything, I was thinking of having Skaar sort of in the background, and Simba has like the claws into the paws of Mufasa, and he's about to kill Mufasa, and then he has the realization like something's off here, and then Skaar kind of like understands that something weird's going on with Simba, like he's starting to maybe be gotten to by Mufasa and the people around, or the lions around him. And he just has the hyenas kind of jump them, and they try to kill both of them. Where Mufasa dies, Simba survives, barely, and Rafiki kind of heals him, and then after that, we get the big cloud scene with Mufasa, and then things kind of progress in a similar way. But I thought of Skaar, attacking Simba at that point, just outing him there. I don't like that. I kind of like Skaar more hanging on to, no, you're mine. You're, like, I
think it flowed better the other way.
Right. But I did write almost that whole ending that way before going back to change it. But I think just Skaar having this crazy idea that he totally controls Simba, just worked better than him just being like, oh, you're right, and then trying to kill father and son there. It would have made more sense maybe logistically in terms of like he doesn't want any competition, but I just think it makes more sense story-wise and for this version of Skaar to kind of still have that hold on Simba. So that's why I went with this version instead. I also almost went with What If Mufasa Survived the Stampede as the title for this. So Skaar would do that thing he does in the original movie, but Mufasa would survive. And this would have featured Skaar leave with some of the other lionesses and sort of form his own. This wouldn't have Simba with Skaar. This would have Simba with Mufasa and this big war that would happen, this big lion war basically, with Skaar and a bunch of other outlanders basically facing off against the Pride Rock people. I keep saying people, lions. And just having this big kind of lion war and leading to that. That was kind of the original plan, but the more I thought about it, the more interesting I think that Simba going with Skaar would have been.
I like the hyenas better. Just
right.
They're a much more potent symbol of just like unchecked abuse of like the environment around them. Like, they just eat. They eat too much. That delicate balance goes on. I think with just two lions, it starts getting more complicated.
Definitely. And one of the things I tried to point out in this, and maybe it wasn't as clear in the actual video, was that Pride Rock is still going through a similar, maybe not quite as bad as it was in the original Lion King movie, but they're still going through a big drought. So like natural, a disaster, I guess drought can be considered that, I think, has happened where like there's no rain for a really long time. And also the hyenas on the outlands have been having to hunt more to feed Simba and Skaar. So they're like picking off the edges of everything. And that's kind of resulted in Pride Rock not quite as prominent as it was at the beginning of the movie. So that's another thing I just wanted to point out about that. But yeah, this was a fun one to put together. I had to do it really quick, like we said, but I think that I wouldn't really change too much about it. I think that this one came together really well.
I thought it was really good.
Thanks.
I think what I like most is like, as I was thinking about it on the drive here, I'm like, man, you set up a perfect trilogy if you wanted to do it.
Oh, I got so many more ideas.
Because you could have part two, basically Simba forming his own pride.
Yeah.
Building, maybe figuring out what it is really to be a king, like building his own pride elsewhere. And then in the third one, you could have Pride Rock seek him out and be like, we've got trouble. And so these two prides unite to face some sort of catastrophe of some sort. I'm like, man, you'd have a couple of great sequels with this, with the two lions out there.
Right. With Kion teaming up with Simba, like the two prides joining, it could be a big deal. So they could, I could see them going, a lot of different directions if this was the story that, actually happened. But I definitely already have a bunch of ideas. It would be fun to go back maybe, next year or something and do this one more time.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, it'd be cool to go back and see what else we could change. But so that's all for the what if on this one. We'll get into the thoughts on the live action remake, which I know you guys are probably interested in hearing our thoughts about that. And then we're going to go into the questions that you guys asked on Twitter and Facebook. So the live action remake, I saw opening night because I knew I was going to have to talk about it. And, I wanted to, get my thoughts on that straight before, at the same time that the what if video was released. So I had those two opinions going. So I really didn't like it. Almost at all. Rob, thoughts?
One of the most soul-crushing cinematic experiences I've ever sat through.
I think I agree with you.
Doug said, he mentioned in his review, and he's absolutely right, because Doug's like, I'm angry, and I'm just depressed. Thoroughly depressed. And I hate that term, ruined your childhood. Hate it so much. I never use it. This might be the one that broke me, and this is the first time I'll be using the term like, yeah, this kind of ruined my childhood a bit. Because
I'm not a big fan of that term either. I wouldn't say it ruined my childhood. But.
I never use it, but I'm like, because I had this moment where I was sitting there in the middle of the theater, and I thought back to how much fun I had watching that movie, and what a great time it was in my life. And then I thought, like, wow, Rob, did you think you'd be sitting here 25 years later just watching this soulless dreck? Like, did you think that this is what Disney's future was? Or you'd be like, oh, no, like, they're going to make more great pieces like The Lion King, or is this what you thought was going to happen? And when I thought about that, it honestly tainted the past a bit. I'm like, wow, how naive I was back then.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's just sad that this is where we ended up. So yeah, it kind of did a little. I'm just like, congrats. Like, this is the first time you've made me pull that term out.
From the very beginning, the one thing that I was looking forward to with this, and I was not looking forward to seeing this, but the one thing I was like, in theaters, I know this will at least be cool, is getting to see Circle of Life and all the score, the Hans Zimmer score, just blasted on screen with all the images, are at least going to be cool to see in a theater. I thought that this was my theater that I saw it in, but Rob told me it wasn't.
Nope.
The mix for the music is
awful.
very low.
Very bad.
I was shocked by that.
The sound effects drown it out.
It.
It's very muted. I was like super shocked. The Hans Zimmer score, the movie is overscored like crazy. And he did it right in 94. There are moments of pure silence in that movie where he's like, no, I'm not going to put music here. You don't need it. This one, I swear, it's just covered with music, beginning to end, without a moment of silence. And I feel like that's the studio. Because I feel like if Zimmer did it right in 94, and he's like, okay, I'm going to do it again, and is overscoring the hell out of it, my guess is Mickey told him, like, no, you got to tell the audience what to think! Our music every single second! And it just created such bizarre scenes, like, I remember Rafiki waving the stick around and like beating the hyenas, and like Zimmer brings in the big like Pride Rock thing, like, oh, and I remember turning to Doug and I'm like, does this really warrant epic music for what's like monkey beating dogs with sticks? Like it just, nothing was right. The Les Bohème choir is like way more downplayed because they had to put the damn Beyonce song in it. I have no problem with the Beyonce song. I thought it was fun. I thought Beyonce was one of the few people that turned in a decent performance in this. But I'm just like, that Les Bohème choir is so good and so drives the pace of that movie that to take that out of that scene where Simba like journeys across to return to Pride Rock and just do that kind of slow moving Beyonce song, I'm like, no. Like, this just feels like it's just dragging everything out.
No, I agree with that. And I feel like that's the whole movie. And I don't want it to seem like I'm just going after it just to go after it. I think that this isn't, like we said earlier, this is important to talk about because this is going to make a crap ton of money for Disney. It already is.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter what we say.
Right.
I mean, we're going to make no difference.
I mean, it's got about a 55% on Tomatoes.
Our audience, like, at the very end of it, like, applauded. And I was in the back.
There's
like,
a smattering of applause.
like, I was in the back. Like, I will say it was maybe more of a smattering, but I was in the back like Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men, and I don't judge people like this, but there's one of the few times where I was just like, you fucking people. Like, how dare you?
Right. But like I said, I do think it's important to discuss this because we're basically telling them that this is all we want. And it shouldn't be, because Disney, as what Doug brilliantly pointed out in his review of this, is that Disney has always been about innovation and always been about pushing things forward. And, you know, while I understand that the technology, okay, like, it's great. They look like real lions mostly to me. I think that's one thing that's awesome. But they can actually do.
I'm just going to disagree and say, like, it's not that it's bad. It's fine. It's that everyone's like, this is the game changer. I'm like, if you saw Jungle Book,
I didn't see Jungle Book.
There's nothing about this to me that's like, this is the game changer. I'm like, Jungle Book was more of a game changer than this.
Sure.
You know, like, it's I don't know why people are saying this as if it's like this is the greatest step ever, and I mean, it's not.
I'm not saying it's a big, like, giant leap from other technology that I've seen, but I mean, it is very impressive to see these kind of, like, these renderings play out. I think it looks.
What's the point of doing it
in that form? But
what's the point of doing it if you remove all expression and emotion from their faces?
Why not use this technology for something original, and then this could be tied to that?
Or why have dialogue?
Right.
You could have had somebody with the voice of Rafiki maybe narrate this thing and not have any dialogue in it, and I still think it would have worked better. Because that's what.
Interesting take on it.
I laughed. I mean, when Mufasa died and Simba went, no! And he just looked like a little cat mewing. Like,
he was like,
yeah, I'm just like, I just laughed. I couldn't control myself. I'm just like, this is just hilariously bad.
Well, if they weren't such a slave to the photorealism, they could have put some expressions on their faces. I don't think anyone would have gave a crap about that. It looks realistic enough. If you could have just exaggerated a little bit, I think it could have went a long way.
There was one moment where I felt emotion in this movie. And this is a movie devoid of soul, devoid of emotion, devoid of any single reason to exist.
Yeah.
It is one of the most worthless movies ever made. But there was one moment near the end where I'm just like, I felt it there for a second. And it is when Rafiki goes up and puts his hand on Simba's face and like moves his hand down, like similar to what he did with the picture. And the way they did the animation there without dialogue, no dialogue, for a split second, I'm like, there was the movie you could have made, where I'm just like, cool. I felt emotion there between those two characters.
Right. But then
nowhere else do I feel emotion in this movie.
A minute later, they completely ruined the Mufasa and the cloud scene. I hated that, man. I actively despised that scene, that version of the scene.
Well, I'm not even... We're getting confused. I'm talking about... This was at the very end of the movie.
Oh, you're talking about...
Right before he says, yeah, because
I thought he does that when he sees Simba in the rainforest or whatever.
Maybe I forgot, because it's not a good movie, but it was the one at the end that I noticed. Okay. Like, because he doesn't say...
He does that to Mufasa at the beginning.
He doesn't say, it is time. But when he does it to Simba at the end, like when he's like basically saying like go up there, and he does that same like that kind of touching his face, I'm like, God, I felt actual emotion there for a second. Like these two characters shared a connection, and he's just like blessing him or something, and I'm like, but that was it. I'm like, and that was 10 seconds.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
But no, the cloud scene, like...
The cloud scene is the thing I hated the most, because that's my favorite scene from the original.
Yeah.
And how they rushed through that, I was shocked, because they didn't even have the moral of the whole thing was not...
Yeah, without the moral of the story. They actually just took the moral out about, like, facing the past, running from it or learning from it.
Visually, I was so upset, because you can do anything in this movie with the clouds and everything, and all they did was have James Earl Jones' voice, and just like a little lightning outline of his face.
I laughed because I laughed and turned to Doug, and I'm like, "Are we watching the rough cut? Is this one of those special effects scenes missing inserts?"
Anything. You could have done some visually stunning scene with that, and like, you didn't have to do beat for beat what happened in the animated version, because that would probably look cheesy if you had the whole line or in there. But like his face or you could have done anything with that scene, and they did nothing with that.
Absolutely nothing. Just random stupid things. The problem is when you make it a shot-by-shot remake, you can't help but compare it, and that's when you notice all the flaws, like the mouse scene in the beginning, where it follows that damn mouse like for a minute and a half.
And this was the dialogue-less version you're talking about?
That might have worked, but I know what's going to happen generally, and they couldn't even do the paw thing, which was a great shot thing. Instead, he comes out of the shadows, which is lame. But I'm like, why are you wasting a minute and a half of my time on a mouse?
Yeah.
The scene, the weird scene, like Nala escaping, could have been.
I actually liked that they added that, but the execution's not great. But
here's the problem: when you make it a shot-by-shot remake, and we've already seen the original, I'm like, there's no suspense here because we know she's going to make it. So this is more padding. The scene with with Simba's fur going through that.
I hated that.
Fucking 5-minute long scene. And it goes on and on and on, falling down here.
They
and then,
did the giraffe
eats it. Yeah, and then it's the dung beetle pushing it. I laughed because, like, the second Rafiki picked it up, I turned to Doug and I'm like, and he dies of E. coli. But
when that whole... I did dislike that entire thing, but when it got actually back to Rafiki, in the original, there's that big realization that, like, Simba,
he's alive!
Right. And
he's alive!
And he's laughing, and in this, he just sees the thing as like, Simba's alive! And then, like, brushes off the thing, and that's it. Like, this is a big climactic moment.
That was another moment where I'm like, 5 minutes wasted for that, and it adds nothing. The original did it in 15 seconds and spelled sex. Apparently the story goes supposed to be SFX, but so you have all these scenes that feel padded, and they're a complete waste of time because there's no suspense in this movie, because we know every single thing that's going to happen because it's shot for shot. And then you get weird things like Nala shows up, and that feels even more rushed than it does in the original. So you padded the thing out with an extra 10, 15 minutes, and yet it still feels rushed.
No, that's the thing that we're talking about, is that it feels longer and rushed.
Simultaneously, it was like, how do you do that? I mean, that's kind of amazing.
Kind of
like,
impressive,
that almost
honestly.
seems impossible, but...
Right.
And then, like, I lost it the most. Like, I honestly thought, I'm like, they're going to kick me out of this cinema, because I was laughing.
Hysterically laughing.
Laughing hysterically. And Doug's just like, what in God's name is so funny? Like, he was just getting pissed at this point. Like, he's like, what is so freaking funny, Rob. And I was just like, it was during the Can You Feel the Love Tonight song, and I'm just like, it's Can You Feel the Love Tonight? And he's like, what? I'm like, can you feel the love tonight? And he's like, I don't get it. And I'm just like,
it's
during the day. And I'm just like, you had one job. One job! And it was to set it at night. And they couldn't even get that right.
No. I mean, also, like I said before, I think the visuals are impressive in terms of technology type thing. But it's such a dry look. I mean, not dry is not the right word.
It's gray.
Right. Everything is washed there's no
out.
Color at all.
Soulless, washed out. Gray. Doug brought up this point. I agree. He's like, Rob, would you want to go to Africa after seeing this movie? I'm like, no. And I've seen Disney nature documentaries that make me want to go to Africa.
By the way, the little addition of the slow motion running away when Nala first showed up, I was like, okay. I know what you're... I get it. All right. Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, this would not make me want to go to Africa. It would make me want to avoid it because I'm like, what a desolate place with no color, no life. No, it just... Everything about this movie is just soulless. Absolutely soulless, and I'm like, and this is why I wish people would stop talking about the technology, because it's an ugly movie. You had all of this technology at your disposal, and you could put real animals there, and it looks ugly as sin.
Right. I mean, it looks. They try to make it look realistic. It looks realistic, I guess, but like it just.
But it doesn't, because you washed all the color out.
Right. Yeah. There's not like there's no pop on the screen.
No, there's no pop at all. Like I've seen, I watch nature documentaries all the time on like Netflix and stuff, and like they look gorgeous. And I'm like, this, and this does not.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree 100%. The only thing that I legitimately liked was Timon and Pumbaa, and I think that even people who don't like it like Timon and Pumbaa in this.
They were a slow burn for me. Doug like turned to me. He's like, "Wow, I didn't think it was possible to out-gay Nathan Lane, but they found a way." But the first like couple minutes, I thought I was gonna hate his voice so much because it sounded like Honey Badger to me. It's just like, look at that crazy fuck. He gets up and does what he wants. Honey Badger don't care. And I'm just like, oh my god, like this is gonna drive me nuts. But
I really like Billy Eichner.
As it went on, Eichner's voice like actually kind of. It became more and more endearing. I think he toned it down a bit. It was like that first minute was kind of driving me up a wall. But as it went on, I'm like, okay, honestly, I like Eichner. I like Rogen. These two feel like real people. And they're giving a real comedic performance where everybody else's comedy was falling flat. Mm-hmm. And by the end of it, I'm like, maybe the only thing that I'm like, honestly, I like them as much as the original. Like, it's different, but... I think Brad was saying it felt like that's where an actual Jon Favreau movie was coming in with like witty banter. And I'm like, I agree. And it's like, I don't know who to blame for this because I'm like, I liked Jungle Book more than this. I know Doug hates it more than I do. I don't hate it. I don't think it's great. I think there's some big mistakes in it, but I'm just like, no, that one had more of a vision.
Right.
At least. May not have always been the correct vision. I don't know why Christopher Walken needed to be King Louis. It's hilarious, but it wrecks the tone. But I'm like, you know what? He went for broke for that. There was nothing in this movie that goes for broke. It feels like it was written by an actual computer without any passion behind it. And I don't know if that's Favreau's fault, because I've seen him do way better than this, or if the studio's just like, no, do it this, shot by shot remake, this, and Favreau's like, whatever. Because, I mean, that's part of the problem is Favreau's essentially just directing computers with this. There's very little human interaction here except from the voice acting, which is terrible, by the way.
Yeah, the voice acting wasn't great. Let me ask you this before we move on to the questions, because I know we're running a little bit long this month here. Would you have, I know it's hard to imagine the original not existing, but if you saw this as a kid or as a teenager when you saw the original, would you like this movie?
No. I honestly, I would have thought it would. I probably would not have hated it as much, but I really would have been there like, that's the thing that happened. That was kind of dull. I wasted time on that. Because, like, really this sort of colorless film thing that happens a lot are my least favorite films to sit through. Where I'm like, if you just take something that could be bright, vibrant, and colorful and make it bland, and I would have said the same thing. I'm like, man, this is a boring looking Africa. Like, everything's washed out in this movie. It's not interesting to look at. I would have thought the story was kind of interesting. Like, oh, it's kind of like Hamlet or like this and that. But I would not have come out of this going like, that was a great movie. I would have been like, eh.
Right. Yeah, I would just... But behind everything else, you can't forgive a movie for being boring or dull, and this was the entire time.
Well, it took
95%.
It didn't fix a single mistake. It made new mistakes, by padding it out,
Right.
and then
It
didn't fix a single mistake. It actually made the same mistake twice, because as much as now it's just like, okay, well, the cast of the Lions at least are all people of color, so like maybe this will make sense now. They couldn't even do that because Donald Glover, to me, he was the only thing I liked in Solo. I didn't like that movie, but I loved him in it. So I like Donald Glover, but it's like he is so miscast as Simba. He just did not work for me.
I thought he could fit because I love Donald Glover, and I think that he could be a good Simba. But I mean, all the line
performance he gave,
all the line from everyone though was like that, except for Timon and Pumbaa. Everyone was just a flat line.
Skaar was another one. I whispered to Doug in the middle of it, like, can you imagine if you picked Keith David for that role?
Also, David Oyelowo on The Lion Guard does a great Skaar. He does a great Skaar. He could have been. He has personality. He could have added a lot to this. I think
you could do it. And now more than any point in history, considering the way things are going, like you have a buffet of various people of nationalities and colors to pick from to make this cast work, and somehow they still miscast it.
Chiwetel Ejiofor is a good actor. Everyone here are good actors.
He's just not cast right. He's just not right for that role. Is the problem? There's no actor in this movie that I'm like they won't let them terrible
do anything,
actor.
Though. You know, like
and I mean that could be part of it too. We have no idea if this is, but whatever happened. Very few people. I did like Beyonce. I think was the only one that I felt like was trying to get a performance to come through.
I guess I
kind of liked her now. I just felt like when I was watching, I was like, yeah, I feel like she's trying. And I'm not saying the other people aren't trying, but it doesn't sound like it for whatever reason. The direction.
I want to bring this up with James Earl Jones,
Eichner and Seth Rogen too.
Right? No, they worked, I think. But with James Earl Jones, I don't see a lot of people discussing this, but it is totally unfair for this guy is almost 90 years old. To ask him to come back to do these exact same lines.
I think it's despicable, honestly.
No, but I mean, like, I'm sure he made money off it. It's not like he's complaining about it.
He can't do it anymore.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that is totally not fair to ask him to come back and he's going to be under a magnifying glass. Everyone said, oh, he's not doing as good as before. He's almost 90 years old.
It is physically, and I'm just going to say, it's not that he can't act.
No,
he can still act, but it is physically impossible to get the same tone and timbre in that voice that he had in the original.
Right.
Mufasa in the original, I pegged him at like, in Lion years, I'm like, yeah, this guy's like maybe late 30s, about 40, in his prime. Mm-hmm. Now, when you hear this voice, and James Earl Jones is so old, he sounds older, he sounds kind of sad because of it, and he sounds like Simba's grandpa.
Right.
And I'm like, this is not a mighty lion in his prime. You get a different actor to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need, like, maybe you could have gotten James Earl Jones to do Rafiki. Rafiki's supposed to be older. I don't know. But it's like, you don't get him to do Mufasa. But we have to get him to do Mufasa because that's what the original
That's our
did.
hook.
Why didn't you get Rowan Atkinson then to do John Oliver's character? Because Rowan Atkinson did it a lot better than Oliver did.
Yeah, I thought Zazu was annoying in this movie because they added him to several scenes. And I was like, he wouldn't shut up. I was like, come on, man. I like Zazu in the animated movie.
Oh, and I love Rowan Atkinson in the original.
Right. I like John Oliver, too. I genuinely like John Oliver.
I don't hate John Oliver, but I'll say this. I was just like, I hate John Oliver in the moment right now. Like,
it's just how they
It's like I just want to punch that beak right off that bird's face.
I'm saying they kept adding him to things. Like when they added him to when Simba just showed back up at Pride Rock. For the first time, like he's just there. I'm like, what? Okay.
Or they
like,
cut
Zazu's
lines. Like, I love Zazu in the original. Just like when Simba's about to get it, just all right. I'll take Nala home, and Simba, good luck.
Yeah,
like,
that's not in this.
No, they cut the best bits out and then put pointless shit.
I know, but the James Earl Jones thing, like the more I think about, it, the more it makes me mad because that's not fair.
No,
it's not fair at
he's
all.
Good. James Earl Jones should be able to go out on top. And I feel between Rogue One and this, they're doing him a disservice. Because his voice sounded different in Rogue One.
You're right. I think less so in that movie, but for sure in this one, it was very noticeable.
See, that's funny because I think Brad said that he thought it more in Rogue One versus this movie.
I definitely noticed it in Rogue One, but I felt it more in this one.
If people are noticing it in either movie, and we can have that argument about which is worse, there's a problem going on.
Right, exactly.
You know, and again, it's not James Earl Jones is like one of my heroes.
No, he's great.
But I feel like it's time to let him retire or at least cast him appropriately.
Sure. Just don't put him in that Sandlot sequel, prequel, or whatever they're making now. I don't think any of us want to see that. Anyway, we're going to get to some of your guys' questions because we did get quite a few, so we'll answer those before we sign out for this month. The Critical Android, a good friend to Top 5 and Fanscription, asks, in your Fanscription, there was a scene where Simba leads an army back to Pride Rock, where he's talking about the hyenas and stuff. Was that inspired by Darkseid's brainwashing of Superman and him leading an attack on the Earth from Superman the Animated Series? That is a great episode of Superman the Animated Series, but no, that did not get inspired by that. I think this is just a basic archetypal thing of like the prodigal son returning, except the prodigal son is a bad guy kind of in this one.
I really liked it because it's prodigal son. It's also Moses in reverse, where Moses comes to free his people from the evil tyrant. In this case, the brother who's the evil tyrant comes and attacks, the free people. So I enjoyed that kind of switch up.
Sure. Critical Android also asks, given the darker subject matter of the Fanscription, do you feel like the levity and humor attached to Timon and Pumbaa would feel out of place? I think that's all would be in the execution of how they played it out, because I'm just narrating something. This is going to be, if it's actually a movie, they could read that in there fine. I think that what humanizes...
So that was one of the few...
I guess, lack of a better term, humanizes Simba in this.
That was like probably the only small gripe I had, which was I was just like, and Timon and Pumbaa are back. How does this work with something this dark? Like, so I don't know. Like, I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but I had the same thought. Like, yeah, I don't know. They feel a little perfunctory, but,
I mean, the thing is...
You could maybe find a way.
Right. I think having them in there is important, and they shouldn't be with Kion and stuff at Pride Rock. I think them literally grounding Simba. I mean, like, they're the only thing...
I liked that they grounded Simba.
Yeah, otherwise it's just all darkness.
They're kind of like the opposite of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern from Hamlet. It's like those childhood friends, and they, like, messed him up, but in this case, they're here to ground him.
They're keeping him, like, the light inside of him going, So I think that's important to Simba's character in this. So it would be all in execution. You can't just throw them in there. It has to be a logical progression kind of thing, where Skaar is trying to kill them all the time, like, whenever he sees them with Simba.
Well, Skaar, I'm sure, is a strict father, too, so this may be Simba's chance to get away from that.
Exactly, and he goes off with him at the end, and I think that kind of ties it all together too. So, I think it would, if it's out of place to you, I understand that in just the narration, but I think if this was executed in the animation, the right way, it could work.
We're not writing the actual script, so that would be somebody's screenwriting. That would
be someone else's idea to do. So this is from Kaiju Brown, I think this is. How do you pronounce it? I remember Doug criticizing that the film seemed not to support Simba owning up to his assumed part in Mufasa's demise. Did that influence your decision to have him guilty by inaction in this version? Also, any chance of revisiting this timeline to see where Simba winds up? Or we already answered that second question. I think maybe a lot of people seem to kind of want a more to this story, so maybe next year or something I can go back to it, because there's definitely more we could explore with it. Doug's criticism of Simba's not owning up to his assumed part in Mufasa's demise. No, I mean, none of Doug's opinions on Lion King informed my story on this one, really.
Good man. Oh. No, I just, I don't quite get Doug's criticism of that, because I honestly thought that the way that scene was paced out, particularly in the original, it's just like, it hits everybody. It's like, boom, 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 basically like, Mufasa's death is my fault, Sarabi. What? Murderer. Like, it goes at such a clip that I always got out of it is that the lionesses are in shock.
Right.
That they're trying to process.
Thought it worked in the animated.
Yeah, I thought it was basically a way for Skaar to basically upend things very quickly before they could figure out what was going on. They're in shock. They're processing it. Skaar moves in quickly.
Right. The pacing of all that with the lightning coming in, the storm coming in.
It happens
the camera's
all
always
so
moving.
fast. It didn't bother me. The weird thing is, in this remake, Doug's criticism will be absolutely legit, because they milk it out for so long. I am looking at it now in the remake, like, yeah, man, why don't they do something? Like, they're waiting forever. But in the animated one, I felt like it happened so quick. I never even thought about it. That's like something only Doug kind of came up with.
Yeah, I never heard that criticism before Doug's review of it. Haley, hi Walter. I noticed in Doug's review of the original that he found its themes and lessons to be a bit discordant. Do you and Rob agree at all with his sentiments, especially after reacquainting yourselves with the original's writing and visuals from an adult's perspective? I think we already pretty much answered that.
No. I don't have the same problems that he does with it.
Right. Also, I appreciated your writing for Timon and Pumbaa, which maintained overall tonal consistency and contributed to their narrative purpose and significance. Retrospectively, do you find their original appearances and humor to be a little too puerile or out of place in the plot? Well, I guess that's about the same question. I think it's all going to be in the execution of this. I think I tried to still make it a kid movie enough where kids could enjoy it still without it being too scary. I think Timon and Pumbaa would have to be in there for comic relief anyway. But I think they serve their purpose.
The thing to remember about The Lion King that I don't think Doug quite gets is he may have a point in that, like, you could argue that it may have been a better story had Simba done something that he regretted and that may have contributed to Mufasa's death. Like, that may have been a better story where you could be like, man, if Simba had done something and then has to just face it instead of running away from it. But the story itself as it's presented is just basically about Simba being gaslit. He's been told by Skaar, like, you did this. This is all your fault. Yeah. And it's really a gaslighting story. Now, you could argue, like, well, maybe it would have been better if it wasn't that and instead it was this. But as it was presented in that movie, I didn't have a problem with it.
Gotcha. Christopher Russo asks, do you feel the remake has an advantage or disadvantage of its use of CGI despite it being called a live-action remake? Definite disadvantage.
Disadvantage.
Yeah, for sure. That's not even a question for us. I think that's kind of one of the biggest complaints about the remake is that you can't have expression on the lions' faces.
Had you filmed real animals and tried to animate their faces, fine, you can call it live action.
It's a Homeward Bound situation.
But I mean, that's well, keep this in mind. Like, had they done this without dialogue, you might have been able to do that.
That's true. But, I mean, they didn't go that route.
Or even, I'm not even against if they want to CGI it, but it was the way this was executed did not work.
Right, I agree. Billy, Bo, Willie, Banana, something, and it cuts off. That's a great name. So then how would Lion King 2 and Lion King 1.5 be altered to match up with this continuity? I mean, there'd just be new stories from this. I mean, things are so different. I mean, I wouldn't even try to match up. Maybe having Kira in there as Kion's daughter, you could maybe make that
you can always incorporate elements from, like, we were talking about the way they did with the Castlevania anime, but...
Right, I mean, you could have some stuff from 1.5 maybe in there with Timon and Pumbaa, but I wasn't a fan
But just the
of
half, not the one.
Right. 1.5 was a weird experiment they did. But yeah, I wouldn't really take too much from there if we went on with it. Jordan Carpenter asks, what you have done in the remake to at least make it watchable? What do you think, Rob?
I mean, number one, expressiveness in the faces.
Yeah,
that was a huge disadvantage.
Thing.
Number two, recast it. I think that the casting was just off. Number three, stop padding it. Don't pad it out with stupid things. And like that was another thing I forgot to mention. That mistake, that scene they dropped in the original where Skaar gets all ewy with Sarabi, and they dropped that.
Was that with Nala?
Or was it with Nala? It was with one of them.
It was with Nala, I think.
Okay, maybe it was with Nala. So he's getting ewy with one of them.
Right, which is worse if it's with Nala.
And they dropped it. Mm-hmm. And so they do it with Sarabi in this one, but either way, I'm just like, it adds nothing. It's really not necessary. It's like, just let Skaar be Skaar. But they're like, no, it looks like he wants to shack up with Sarabi.
I mean, it makes sense because they try to say that he went after Sarabi before Mufasa did, and there's like this jealousy thing. So it's like he wants to procreate and have his cubs. And
did they? Man, yeah, I actually missed that. Then.
Yeah,
great execution. I must have missed that.
One line that they added that I did like was when Skaar was confronting Mufasa for the first time, and he said, "Oh, I wouldn't dream of challenging you again." And that, like, just having again, like the Skaar there implies that Mufasa.
I like that.
That's a cool addition.
I feel like it doesn't add anything,
really.
And it's just kind of weird to me because I don't know, but I would do that, and I wouldn't make it a shot-for-shot remake.
No, doing something different with the story, same pieces, same concept. I would do something different.
I would have kept the same songs in. If you're adding songs, if you're already having them sing songs, then if you're adding songs, have them sing songs. The Beyonce thing, like, just it took what could have been a great scene from the original and kind of slowed it down to a crawl. And I don't hate the song itself divorced from the movie, but in the movie I'm like, that didn't work. So probably like all of that. Like,
right.
I would have tried to go with a different spin of some sort.
Yeah, I think a different spin, and also I think, they've made such advancements obviously with computer animation and stuff, that having this in kind of the 3D animated style with its own kind of spin on that would be fun to see.
Well, and color.
Yes,
color,
that's what I'm
color,
saying. Make it
color,
very vibrant.
Color.
I agree 100% on that. But that would be the biggest
thing. That? No, not that.
I tricked you.
Actually, that was more color than was in the movie.
Right. It was very
Where was that scene in the movie?
I don't know.
There was no sunset. Yeah, look at how washed out that is.
Yeah.
There's like no color in that. And then look at that. Like just bounces off the screen.
But in terms of improvement, I agree with most of Rob's sentiments there on the live action. I keep having to do this live action remakes.
No color like that in the movie. Never. Ooh. False advertising.
On Facebook, Joe Balach asked, or he just more of a comment, reminded me of the Mask of Zorro plot in a lot of ways. I don't remember the plot of Mask of Zorro. I remember liking the movie. Is it similar?
Yeah, actually, it is. That's not a bad thing. I don't think he did that on purpose.
No, I don't. I like Mask of Zorro.
The Mask of Zorro has a great plot, and I mean, I'd say we're all tapping into similar themes here. Like these are tales as old as time. Like, so I don't think it's a problem. But now that he mentioned it, yeah, because what's her face? Catherine Zeta-Jones, Elizabeta is abducted by Zorro's rival. Zorro ends up training. Okay. Antonio Banderas, like Anthony Hopkins, Hispanic, by the way. That was hilarious.
He's great in the movie,
but yeah, no, I do love him in that movie.
Yeah, I didn't point that one out or didn't think about that before,
but it's like that's actually kind of cool. And I love that movie. Maybe I didn't even realize that you were doing that. Maybe that's one of the reasons I liked it, because it reminded me of that plot. But no, it totally does. I think it would actually work here. So
I got to rewatch Mask of Zorro. I did like it. I do like that movie.
That's a great movie.
Right. I don't remember a lot about it right now.
Even despite like Anthony Hopkins' lack of attempting, he like tries an accent in the first minute.
He gives it up.
$3 for 3 men. Reminder never to come back to California.
Anthony Hopkins in almost anything is pretty great. I guess except for Transformers 4.
Anthony Hopkins, even in bad films, I enjoy.
Right, for sure. We're going to preview next month a little bit. Rob, you are taking over next month.
I am taking over next month.
And what you got for us?
With Endgame coming out, I'm going to do with What If Black Widow Lived.
Okay.
I actually really love that movie. That was one thing that irked me the wrong way. I'm a huge Black Widow fan, and I'm like, really? This is what we're doing with her after...
She's getting her own movie now, they just announced.
Yeah, I don't know. So, and I mean, I may set myself up for disaster here, because maybe the Black Widow movie's just going to bring her back.
I think it's a prequel or whatever.
Yeah, see, if it's a prequel, then I'm like, so this is how it's going to end anyway. Like,
David Harbour's in it. That's cool.
I did not like what they did with her. Like, I liked what they were doing with her character up until that moment. And then I'm like, really? Like, because I love Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow. I like Black Widow in the comics. I like Black Widow here. Yeah, they're different things, obviously. But it just rubbed me the wrong way, man. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do it the way I want it.
Sure. All right. Well, look forward to that next month. If you're listening to this without the video, make sure you subscribe to our iTunes feed or wherever you get your podcasts. We're on a lot of different platforms right now. We will be back next month with Rob's version of Endgame with Black Widow Living, so look forward to that. If you haven't seen The Lion King yet and you're on the fence about it, new one, don't see it. Don't support
Please don't.
These things.
Please, just not even out of curiosity.
Right. I mean, I'm more cautious now about Mulan. I think that could be a really cool, different version of
that one
live
had
action,
problems to begin with, at least,
see.
though. That one's is like Pete's Dragon for me, where I'm like, all right, that wasn't a great movie. Like, that had some issues, so like maybe you could do something.
Mulan, I think, could work. I think they're still planning the Sword in the Stone remake for the Disney Plus, which could be great if they go about the right way.
Depending on how they do it, because I'm like, that's one where I'm like,
execution.
I love the original Sword in the Stone, but
Me
that's
too.
when I'm like, yeah, that was just a goofy kind of comedy.
Right.
I'm like, I'd be very curious what they do with this.
Absolutely. And yeah, there's a couple other, like, I think Atlantis could be that could be the one that could translate to live action.
I never understand people's definitions of like overrated, which is why when Doug said it was overrated, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, but underrated films, I get. And Atlantis, that animated movie, I thought was underrated. I loved that movie.
Yeah, I think live action, you could do a lot with
You could
that.
do a ton with it if you do it
spins on it.
right.
Yeah, and it's not one of those, pillars of Disney where you could really, do different stuff with it and people wouldn't complain too much, I don't think. So.
But this to me, and maybe this is why this broke me, and it broke Doug too, in different ways. He was angry, I was just depressed. This to me is the ultimate in creative bankruptcy for Disney. I cannot think of a moment where they've been this creatively bankrupt since the direct-to-DVD sequel eras.
In terms of theatrical, I agree with you. I think that there's been some stuff that they've released straight to DVD that's been terrible.
It is rock bottom. You can be like, well, Dumbo's worse or this is worse. I'm like, there's still something new in it. It could be garbage, but it's like, this is as creatively bankrupt as it gets. At least be worse and try something different.
Right. So, I mean, they don't have much incentive when they're making all this money to do anything different. So, I mean, what we're saying doesn't really matter.
See it.
I know, but like, if we're just
talking
talking
to people
who haven't seen it yet, but if you wanted to see it, you've probably already seen it. Well, thank you guys.
Don't be that guy.
Thank you guys for watching and or listening. We'll catch you right back here on the Fanscription podcast next month. Thanks for watching.